Friends, good morning, everyone. I think it's an interesting subject which we are taking up today. This program which we are covering today has been designed in cooperation with CII, Institute for Logistics in Chennai. The final beneficiary for the content when we were developing for this is keeping in mind the requirement of United Nations senior officials who are dealing with peacekeeping activities around. So that's the way the content has been designed for that. But overall, I would say the subject is very interesting. But to begin with, before that, I would like to clarify a few things around. Sometimes we use the word transport. Sometimes we use the word transportation. Sometimes we use the word shipping. Then sometimes we use in a bigger picture logistics and supply chain management. So to begin with, I would love to clarify all these terms. The very first thing is sometimes we use the word transports. I remember 30 years back, everybody will use the word transport. But today the word is used transportation. The difference is not much. It's basically they are same, but one is with the British English, they used to use the word transport, while with American English we use the word transportation. So there's no difference on that context around. Another term which used, I remember the one first time when we were developing the shipping guide for the UN, and I was instrumental in developing that guide, and that guide is still available online. If any one of you want to see that shipping guide, this is available. It was designed in 86, 87, 1986 and is still updated recently. It's available on the website. You can go on the www.undp and ask for shipping guide. You will be able to find it. It's a beautiful document. But when we were using the shipping, the word shipping was for small transactions, small movements. But if I go in the good old days, shipping means everything to do with the sea. But never mind, the word transportation is much more generic, so it covers all those things around. Another thing comes up is when we talk of transportation, and if you look at the logistic, now logistic transportation is part of the logistics. And the word logistics, as all of you know, comes from the army. So logistic covers from one end to another end, like in our supply chain, we say from supplier to customer. Then any movements which has to be done in the whole logistic chain, that movement is all about transportation. So now you can understand around where the transportation words comes in. And logistic again is also part of the supply chain. So to summarize, I would say the transport and transportation, there's no big difference. Similarly, the word shipping and transportation, shipping has been used mainly with the context of when we are sending by sea and this, but it is also used for smaller packets when you say, oh, are we shipping this package and this and that? So that way also used around. But in our context, when we are dealing with supply chain, let's call it transportation. But transportation is one of the key pillar of, I would say, logistics. If I'm spending around 14 or 15% on logistics, 5 to 6% is being spent in terms of value on transportation. So let's not undermine the word transportation. If today somebody has to bring any savings around or any improvements around in terms of efficiency and faster delivery, mitigating the risk, I think one needs to focus on transportation. I mean, traditionally, not many people have gone into this field. This field was left as very traditional field, but now many people are coming up with a very good educations, and this field is becoming also very strategic. Well, friends, with this, let me tell you what we are going to cover. The very first thing I'm going to focus on the concepts. The concept of transportations, what exactly it is. I'll try to again correlate the relationship between transportation, logistics, and supply chain. Then also when we also talk about the role of the transportation in terms of economy, how big is the role of this one in terms of economy, in terms of GDP, is a really big thing. And now when we talk about the third party logistics and fourth party logistics, what exactly it is. And when we talk of transportation, the Incoterms also comes up. So I'll touch to some extent the Incoterm as well. Lastly, but not the least, there's another issue which transportation, traditionally we are used to it, is a lot of stress factors. So when we talk about transportation, people think it's a lot of stressful job. But that stress also will work around what is good stress, what is bad stress, what is this stress, and then how to motivate people, the motivation theory to get the right people into this profession around. If today you go down and ask anybody who's qualified graduate, do you want to move into transportations? Nobody. They think transportation is nothing but being a truck driver, nothing more than that. Loading and unloading on the truck, that's a normal concepts which people have around. And even if you look in the context of India, I mean, 90% of the transportation business is in the hand of those people who have got one or two trucks or maximum five trucks. It's not an organized sector at all. So, but if you want this to be a saving areas, perfection area, then this need to be streamlined. Well, friend, with this, I move to the next ones. So the agenda what we have today is, as I explained to you earlier, understanding the transportations, role of it in the economic developments, the modes of transportation, many of you are very conversant, whether by road, train, whatever comes around. Overview of Incoterms, I'll give you small flavor of Incoterms, because when we are transporting, there are risks also involved. So Incoterms also will become very important. And keep in mind, Incoterms are not only for the international, although the name is international, but they are also relevant for the domestic transportation as well. Key principles of transportation management, from a carrier to the shipper perspective, and delegation of transport management. That means if I'm trying to delegate or outsource, if you want to call around third-party logistics, fourth-party logistics, now it's the fifth-party logistics, so we'll talk about it. And lastly, but not the least, depending on the stress factors, motivation theory. So the broad objective is to enlighten the concepts and approaches in the field of transportation management. Now let's understand the transportation. Transportation is all about movements. You might be in any business. You might have a company, there's an inbound, there's outbound. And then within the company also there's a movement around. And then again from outside, the reverse logistic is also there. Reverse movement is also there. So technically transportation is all about movements, whether coming in the inbound or within the company or outbound, till it reaches the client around. Now transportation management, basically what it involves, assessing the transportation modes. The very first question should be that should I send it by air? Should it send by sea? Normally we always think air is always the costly, but it may not be true in some cases around. Understanding the regulations which are very important around. If I'm sending a goods which is hazardous, not very safe, what precaution I need to do around in terms of the regulations. Now decisions to have third party or their own fleet vehicles. The old model was everybody wanted to have their own fleet vehicles. Today the concept is of sharing. Just get others to join you. Evaluating the carrier performance, how are they performing around? What guidelines are there? So I'll touch on a little bit few on the KPIs, the performance indicators. The balance, the trade-off between cost and service. I mean, cost is also important, I can understand around, but service is equally important around. If you want the goods to be delivered within a specified time, the cost may go up, but then one has to draw the trade-off between the two around. So in short, if I can say, transportation is regarded as driver of logistic and supply chain efficiency and values. At the end of the day, when you're looking from supplier to the customer, the time, the delivery time, efficiency part, transportation plays very key role in that now. Look at this supply chain now. Starting from the place from where we get the raw materials. The raw material is moved to the supplier, and supplier could be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier, and then from there goes to manufacturing. Then going to distributions, going to customers, could be retailers, and then to the consumer. This is a very simplified version. But if you really look around any typical supply chain in a global context, there must be 20-25 steps around. You can imagine around from each step there's a transportation. To move the raw material to the supplier, there's a transportation. From supplier to manufacturing, again there's a transportation. From manufacturing to distribution, again transportation. You can imagine around, if you want the movements, if you want an efficient supply chain, transportation plays a great role in that. As I was explaining earlier, there's an inbound transportation, there's an outbound transportation. Outbound is obviously linked with fluctuation, uncertainty of demand. Outbound means it is going to the client, and client needs are changing and fluctuating around. So outbound logistic may be changing, but my inbound logistics, delivery part, if I look around, they are certain because I have planned my production. Based on my planning, according to that, my deliveries are happening around. So logistics, if you look summarized way, now trying to again, before I link the transportation with logistics. So logistic is more of a process. That part of the process of supply chain, which plans it first, implements it, controls efficient flow, storage of the goods around. That means if I'm in charge of the logistics, I'm not only taking care of movement, I'm also taking care of warehousing, I'm also taking care of inventory management, I'm also taking care of custom clearances around, I'm also taking care of export, import, whatever comes up in that. The complete chain I'm looking around. So logistic is a bigger game, while transportation is a very critical one, but also very important around. So logistic, as we said earlier, is a science and practical management field of the supply of materials. We're talking of different R's. Like in procurement, we talk of 5 R's. Here there are more R's around. Right material has to reach, right quantity has to reach, right conditions. Particularly when I'm dealing with the food item, when I'm dealing with medical items or any fragile item, I want them to reach in a good conditions around. Right locations, right time, right cost. So this is the way it is covering much more rights around. So let's look around the linkages between SCM, logistics and transportation. So when we look supply chain in a broad pictures, there are one pillar is procurement, one pillar is manufacturing, whether you outsource or whatever. If manufacturing is also outsourced, procurement takes a bigger role. And then transportation also, if it goes to procurement, then the procurement becomes supply chain management. That's what we have been telling in the past also. Procurement is also evolving from procurement to supply management to supply chain management. Now the logistic part when we talk around is that component of supply chain which basically focuses on how, when to get the raw materials, intermediate products and finished goods from their respective origin to the destination. Finished goods are going to the consumer or to the distributor. So when to send, how to send, that's the planning part around. Because when the question comes when and how, in between then storage also comes up around. Warehousing management also comes around. Fulfillment centers also comes around. So that's become part of this. While a responsive transportation network begins with end-to-end visibility. So if you want a very good efficient transportation, visibility in the whole chain is required around. This is where I will touch in the last when we close up the future way we are moving. The blockchain is going to help us to improve the visibility part. I know IoT has also come up around, but I think the blockchain is going to go one step forward in improving the visibility part. Here again you can see the whole supply chain starting from one end to the customer and the end of the consumer. So logistic is taking care of the transportation, which is one of the key pillars. Storages are there. Packing also becomes part of logistics. And handling them, loading, unloading, whatever you may call around at the end of the day, that is also part of the logistics around. So I think by these slides I have so far what I've covered makes you very clear what is transportations, or in the good old days or in the British English we call transport, and what, I mean it is a part of the logistic and logistic is part of supply chain. Let's look at the importance part around. Obviously, traditionally we are trapped into this, oh, transportation is a waste. It's a necessary evil. Yes. It's an inevitable source of cost and risk. When the transportation becomes longer, the risk also becomes more. Cost also goes up. Now, whom do we blame? But if you look at the figures wise, 30% of the logistic cost is attributed to transportation. That means if I'm in charge of logistics, if I have to bring savings, either I can bring from warehousing, or I can bring from inventory, good inventory management, or from transportation. But transportation to me is a low hanging fruits. I think that's the area where the potential of saving is much more. I know many smart people are moving into warehousing, inventory management. On the transportation side, so far, not many have come up around. Not many even certification exists around. I think next year what we are trying to do is focus also a lot on transportation. So as part of the GDP, this number is very impressive. I mean, if I say around 14 to 15% is the logistic cost, transportation is 5% or 6%. In India, I would say it is a little higher side. Then it's a very big number. I think it carries a big weightage around. Now, the role of transportations is obviously to bridge this gap between the buyer and the seller. Seller may be at the raw material stage and the buyer could be at the end of the day. So the complete cycle when we saw around, it bridges the gap. It adds values. Obviously, if I'm able to deliver in time, it adds values. If I'm able to give in the right place, in the right condition. So there is a need to specialize this. There's a global impact around, impact on the economy. You can see the figure, 6.26% of the GDP. Importance to the company, any company. You might be having a sales of $40 billion, but then 4 billion dollars is transportation. If a company like auto company, which are running in billions, 10% of the sale is all about transportation. So importance is there around. Now the packing and the transport planning. I think this also I want to touch up before I come to the modes of transportation. When we are doing the packaging, what size of the pack should be there around? Obviously, if I'm sending by air, the package size has to be reasonable one, which can be transported easily. The stacking part, what are the weight limits of the chosen vehicle? If I'm going by air, what are the weight limit? If I'm sending by truck, what is the weight limit? If I'm sending by barge, it's the limit. Train. So each mode of transportation, this counts a lot around. But then you're doing the packaging and you need some special treatments around, depending on whether it is a dangerous item, it is prone to catch fire, unsafe. All those things has to be looked from the regulation side. This is where it's important. Containerization was a wonderful move which I came around to optimize the movement of this one around. I think most of you know very well there are 20 feet containers, there's a 40 feet containers, there's a 45 feet containers also, but very rarely I've seen. But broadly, when I look at the ISO standards, there are 20 feet container and a 40 feet container. The good thing about the container is you can have a sealed containers, obviously increase the security around. You may have small items around, then you can put them into the bulk into the containers, and in the process you can improve the security part around. Because when we are putting into the container, then small packets, obviously container weight goes up, you need handling equipment, so that's the other side of this. Now these are the type of vessels on the sea side, the maritime vessels, roll on, roll off, very common. Basically for vehicles, I would say, if I'm getting the vehicles, say from Japan to India, or Japan to any part in Africa, they are coming in an RO form, they just drive into the vehicle into the side. I don't have to lift and unload it. Here it straightway drives in, and when the ship reaches the port, it straight drives out. So roll in and roll out. Is it clear? So that's how it is done. Then there are container vessels, as you can see in the picture. I'm putting in the container. The general cargo you know very well. So it's not a containerized. I'm putting the various general cargoes. And the last is the tanker ones, particularly for the oils and those crude oils, refined whatever oil is around, so that's the way it comes the tanker form. Again, there are two types of liners, conference liners, non-conference liner. Conference liner means they belong to an organization of ship owner. So there are guidelines, there are procedures. Non-conference liners don't belong to anyone. I own one ship. Once I get a load from X and Y, I go there. Next time I get a load from someone, I go that route around. Or if I get a mix of the routes around, if I find the more date, the load I have got for Singapore, I'll go to the Singapore first, then take my diverter around. The time is not very clear, defined ones. But in the case of conference liners, the route tramping, in the conference liner, there are fixed days and fixed timing when it leaves. And just like airline, you can very well say when this my goods are bound to reach there. On the way, there may be typhoon or something. I can understand around, but still there are fixed timing, fixed day to reach around. So that way, the predictability is there of the goods to reach there. Other modes, which are all conversion, the truck, which is the major one. Then we have air. Then we got the train. There are also others. I'll touch on those. Now, air freight I will talk about is the most cost-effective mode when lead time and order-to-cash cycle time may be there. The lead time can be cut down. If a ship may take a month or something, by air I can send it within 24 hours. So that's the way it is advantage around. So your lead time can be cut down to bare minimum. Now, the next one is come on the rail transportations. It's provide limited services, service frequency. The network is not inextensive. Other than India, I think they're trying to focus a lot on the rail transportation because that's the way we can cut down the environmental impact also, because the trucks are taking away a lot. So if some load can go away to the rail, I think it can cut a lot. The road transportation, the most flexible, versatile, but it also pollutes a lot. Choose the most appropriate mode, determine the ultimate destination where you want, and the speed and the frequency of delivery required. What is the frequency? What is the delivery time? What is the lead time? Is the product prone to damage, particularly medicals, drugs, and this? So either I have to send by air, but if I can wait, then I have to get the container, which is refrigerated containers. So I have to find the food items. Again, they are prone to damage, prone to getting spoiled. So match the type and size of the cargo to the type of transport available. Physical attribute, as I was explaining to you. Because sometimes when you send the goods which are very big, but the port does not have the capacities around. I remember the days when we used to send the goods for sometime disaster happened and we used to send through Mombasa in Kenya. In Mombasa port capacity was too less. And suddenly you find 25, 30 ships has come up around and each ship has got more than 100 containers and their capacity may be only 100 or 60, 70 containers in a day. That means your turn may come after 10 days. That means you have to pay the damage charges, and in the process, the foods or the goods which you're trying to send for the poor people, they may get damaged. Look at the cost implications. I mean, you might be saving on the shipping side, but then the damage charges could again escalate the cost around. I think this is a very good example I will talk around. I mean, you're trying to send, let's say, 68 tons by sea. By air, capacity is 66.3. Now, the volume of each shipment, sea versus air, is 2.5 meters cubed plus this. The average value, what we're taking around. Now, here we take door-to-door lead time. If I'm doing by air, it is 9 days. I'm sending the goods to Far East. Sea is going to take 41 days. Interest rate is okay, same. Number of shipments by air is 40. By sea is 10. So this gives you the logistic cost on the freight rate. The freight rate, if you look around, it is 5 times the sea. But then there are other cost element. If you look around, that's where you will see. The next one is the packing cost. Obviously, the packing cost in the case of air is less. It's going by air. I don't have to do that much big packing around. While in the sea, since it's going to be handled with cranes and other way around, the motor, I have to do a much better packing around. Local transportation cost, because it is airs are going much closer to the terminal, the place where I have to deliver. The cost is lower. Insurance is lower. Then my capital during the voyage which is stuck around, that means my goods are reaching in 9 days. I'm sending a big machine, and if it reaches in 9 days, from the day 10 or 11, it starts producing something. While in the case if I send by sea, by the time it starts doing productive work, I've wasted at least another 30-35 days as compared to the by air mode. Then that 35 days could give me a big return. So that's a big saving, that's angle around. So my capital is also not tied up because my production starts much earlier. I'm able to deliver my goods much faster. So ordering cost, local transportation cost again is lower because in case of sea, I have to bring from the seaport, while in the case of air, I may get air terminal very close to the place where my client is. So I can cut short the cycle time of the local transport. Warehousing, again, I don't have to keep it for a long, tight capital in stock. So if you look in a broad picture, by air, it comes to around $3.1 per kg, while the other one comes around 3.32. So if I look at the freight rate, somebody say, guys, oh, this is very costly. It's 5 times costly. But when you add up all these components around, then you say, guys, air is also equally cost effective. So I think this example I thought may be a good eye opener in some cases around. When it comes to the cargo's characteristics, now when we talk about before we decide the mode of transportation, we always talk of the cargo characteristics. Characteristic is the size part, the dimension, the volume. Now, some item when you're sending, they're big in volume, but the weight is very less. Like cotton, it may occupy a big volume, but the weight may be very less. Dimension, some machines may be enormously big. I'm sending a big generator, let's say 10-meter long versus 5-meter long, truck cannot take it. So one has to find around different modes around. Weight, obviously the absolute weight of the cargo, what is this? If it is 15 tons, 40 tons, 100 tons, big castings around, how do I move it? Hazardous cargoes, you need special handling and service requirements. And then density also. Some are more dense, some are less dense, but they go with what suits them. They take a weight to volume ratios, and that ratio is fixed up, and then they decide what is good for them. Stowability, and then the handling part, ease of difficulty of handling a product, and the liability part. The liability means if you feel these goods are going to be stolen, threat is there. I have seen many cases around when we used to buy many things for the peacekeeping activities around. There used to be sometimes threat. Vehicle is going and then we have found the radio has been taken out from there. So those cases also we have seen around. The liability means you may have to cover much more comprehensive insurance, which again the cost goes up. Or if you're sending to those countries which are war prone, unsafe, then again the liability factor could go up. There's another mode of transportation we call as pipeline. The pipeline is used basically if I have to transport from one corner to another corner. Let's say either the coal slurries are going around, or I'm moving the coal. I've got a coal block, say half a mile, 1 mile away. I can move those goods through the pipeline. Or I've got a crude oil in one country, another country is doing the processing part of it. Then I could also have the crude oil being shifted from one country to another country by pipeline. So this is, and pipeline is also used at your own home. You see waters, other things as well. So pipeline, if you look at the bigger picture, the worldwide, I mean the rail is a bigger one. While in India, when we look around, the truck is a major share of the transportation. Rail is very small. By water, mean by the sea itself, we also use a big. So this is again a global picture, but then when we look from the Indian context, the ratios are different around. Road, very common. I will say in India, this is a major dependence on that. Most flexible and widely used, considerable competition within the industries. Rail is another mode of transportation, very cost effective. And in some countries, this is used to a lot. There's a lot of being promoted around from the environmental angle also. If you want to cut down the carbon footprints, I think this is the way to go. So we expect also in India this one to become number one priority in the years to come. Water, I mean through sea, through canals, through rivers, that's also a mode of transportation. So if we have seas and rivers and waters and canals, they can be also used to move the goods from one corner to another corner. I would say more cost effective, less damage to the environment. So that's the way we look at it. But again, when we are sending by water, seaside, a canal side, it's used basically when goods are very heavy, very dense, and freighter. Speed not an issue around. That's what we do. But if speed is the issue, maybe then you go with the trucks, you may go with the train, you may go by the air. Those factors are there. The types of vessels. Now, this is important to look around. The break bulk freighters, the big ones. Container ship, where the containerized, as you can see in one of the pictures also here, it's all containerized. RO, I showed the picture to you earlier. The bulk freighters, they only cover the bulk items. Tankers and sea-going barges. So the barges are also basically ships, but smaller ones. So these barges are used only in the canals. If we want to do in the Ganges side, then I could have sea-going barges around. So the barges are basically smaller ships, smaller things to move from one city to another city if they are connected through river, canal, or whatever. Now the rate, when we talk about the liner rate, making cost fairly fixed in natures, low variable cost, ship designed for a specific trade routes. They design, guys, okay, this ship will go from X place to Y place, this will go to Kenya, this will go to Nigeria, this will go to this place, or whatever country Nigeria is not, so whichever we think around, we can connect around. Price according to the value of the service to maximize the profitability. But as I said to you, they always look at weight or measure. So you could measure the size, as I was telling you, the cotton. The cotton may be only 10 kgs, but be occupying a big space. And the person who has to carry his ship or air or train is occupying the space. So they charge you what suits them in terms of, if they go with the weight, that particular volume, how much will be the weight, or with the volume, whichever is profitable, they take that rate around. Different commodities would have different WM ratios around, so they have the parameters fixed already. Conference rate making, as I told you, conference liner means they basically belongs to associations, and they are much more in terms of quality, in terms of reliabilities, in terms of the lead time, they are much more reliable around because they are members and they start at one particular time and reach at one time. You could get the discounted rates if you are having if you have a patronage agreements, you have a long-term arrangements, yes, you could get that. Air is the most expensive one, but fast. I think any item which is perishable, high values, and low volume items, mostly intermodal, that's how it goes on. Now the cargoes, I think I explained already. This is for general cargoes, which is many commodities, and container means just going into the container format. Other consideration which could come into the rate is the time versus volume when you want the goods to reach. If currency adjustment, particularly if it is going to take 40 days to reach the goods, and if you are allowing the currency fluctuations, then yes. And the port also comes into the picture. Some ports are very effective. The moment it reaches, within hours the goods are taken out. So naturally the rates are different. But there are some ports where the ship has to go and wait there. In those situations, which are much more congested ports, handling capacity is very poor. In those situations, the rate may be high. So you have to understand around whether you as a procurement person, are you dealing as a logistic person, are you dealing as a supply chain person, or even transportation, you have to understand what makes the rate to go. Now here it gives you a very thumb rule figures around the mode characteristic. If I go by air, if I go by motor, mean basically vehicle, motor vehicles, pipeline, rail, water. It gives you broad ideas around what are the thumb rules cost per ton mile. So if you got a 1 ton of the goods and 1 ton of the goods I have to move by mile, either by air will be costing this much, motor will cost me this much, it's basically the truck, pipeline. You can see the pipeline is the cheapest, rail is the next one. Sorry, the water is the cheapest one by mode of transportation, by sea is the cheapest one. Then comes the pipeline, then comes rail, and then comes the motor vehicles, and last is the air. It shows you the operating ratios, the volume carried. Now the volume carried, if I look around 40%, I think which is true when I look at India, most of the 40% of the transportation is through by air, transportation by road. Pipeline is very negligible. Rail is yes, but 26 in our case may be less. Water is also important. Air is a very small percentage of it. Speeds, you all know, average speeds around. Who are they competing with whom? So air is basically competing with motor vehicles around. Type of freights, air will go only the high values where you feel there could be theft, there could be losses. Motor vehicles will be varies widely, mainly the bulk items, general cargoes, while in the case of pipelines, certainly the petrol, the slurry of the coal. Rail is all about the low value and the bulk item. All bulk items, they go by the rail. Water, again low values and bulk item. So this gives you a broad, the characteristic and the cost parameters. This is another form of carrier, I'm sure we all know very well. We all use this as a mode of transportation as well. Next comes what is intermodal. I mean, this question comes very oftenly around. Some say I'm expert on the modal transportation. This first question is asked them, what is intermodal? The use of two or more modes of transportation. In the good old days, it was only from one corner to another corner. But today, if you look around, the goods may go by train first, then go by truck, then go to the sea, reaches the other end. After reaching the other end, again it goes by truck, sea, truck, and maybe again canal, and reaches the end of it. So you can imagine around, you're moving the destination shipment from one origin to destination. The modes of transportation could be many. That's what we're calling around. So it has advantages of each mode used around. It also reduces the risk of theft and loss, shortens, but these all goes in the containerized form. Container is loaded in one place, then it gets out of the ship, again taken out of the container which is sealed, goes on the truck, goes on the train till it reaches the place. So basically you are promoting seamless from one end to another end. It eliminates unnecessary handling. You have the words freight forwarders, custom clearing agents, liner agent, shipping agent, ship brokers. So there are a wide range of people who are involved around in this game. I'll explain a little further the meaning of each one's around. Now here comes the delegation part, the outsourcing part. So most of the time what happens if I'm in X business, I'm in a pharma company, I'm good in making drugs. I'm in an auto company. I know what I to make around. But the transportation part is a major chunk. I know it might be covering around 10% of my cost. In those situations, I'll say, guys, can I outsource this around? So we have third-party providers who take over the job from you. So third-party providers could be dealing with one region, might be dealing in the north part, one might be dealing with south part, one might be dealing with one state itself. So each state may have a different third-party providers. So they take care of all the movements of your goods to the distributors, from distributors to retailer, retailer to clients. So whatever you want, I think that can be done. So the advantage, the way I look around is if I'm in this business, I don't have to worry about putting my capital into the shipment. I'll say there are third party companies, they will take care. I control my making X and Y product, that's all. My capital is involved only in that product, my knowledge is involved in that, my skill is there. The rest transportation part, the logistic part, I pass on to her. So I focus on my core competency, not the other areas. Shipping and freight agents. Now here comes few things around. Ship brokers, they get a commissions representing the interest of one or more shipping company. I'm a broker basically. Which shipping company to use? They will try to negotiate and get their own commission. If I say, okay, they identify for this client, it is this one, they get their commission from them. Shipping agent for the carrier and the cargo, they act as a representative of the ship owners and they link with the port authorities. Liner agent also like that, custom clearance also. There are many people whose job is to give them the document, they'll get it clear. Now the freight forwarders also do some of those things, formerly called carriers. So if you are moving from one place to another place, you have goods, let's say I have to send the goods from India to Nairobi, but my goods are less than a truckload. So the freight forwarders, what they will do around it, they'll take my cargoes. And there are other cargoes also which are less than a truckload. They'll put them together. And if all of them are going to the same countries, same port, they'll put them into one container itself. So technically what they will charge me, the freight forwarders, say, guys, this is your load. They'll charge me on a less than a truckload, less than a container load. But what they are paying to the other ones, because they are doing consolidation, they are getting as a container, so the rates are much lower. They're getting as a truckload, the rates are lower. So the margin what they make around, that's what they make money from that. And they are the one who issue you bill of lading. There is a word called consignment note, there's a called bill of lading. I think we'll discuss a little later, but briefly it could be also called bill of lading and consignment note are same thing. Look at this now. From the less than truckload shipper, the freight forwarder is picking from hundreds of these LTL, consolidating them. And the game about consolidation is to get the best pricing. And consolidation by destination. So this guy is doing consolidation by destination. So in the process, this guy is getting a saving. If I would have gone directly to this, any carrier, they would have charged me for a small loading, they might charge an X price. But this guy is able to cut down the price by 30 to 35%, gets their margins around. For higher carrier, then the line haul is starting around. And once it reaches the place, the forward terminal, again I break the bulk. Here I'm doing consolidation. But once it reaches the destination part, it reaches X country. And that country I have to distribute it to 40, 50 places. Then I break the bulk. The bulk which I've got after consolidation, I break it. I know this one is going to this place, this one is going to this place. It goes to the consignee. So from consigner to consignee, this is how it goes through. Freight brokers, as I said to you earlier, they are the one who, they're basically the brokers. They work it out with the shipping and the carriers. And they try to get the customers for those carriers also. If you are owning a carriers, 15, 20 carriers, then you find guys, they are the one freight broker, they'll bring the business for you. They'll charge you as well as they charge the client also. Or maybe they charge you and client they bring it in. It depends what type of marketing approach they have. And the aim is to maximize the capacity for the carrier. So in short, they're getting business for you. So those who are the carriers, they know how to do it, but then the business is brought by third party, and this third party, the freight brokers. Couriers, you all very well conversant. We have got UPS, we've got Federal Express, DHS, photo deliveries, and these are normally for the smaller packages, up to 100 kgs or 200 pounds. Look at this traditional role of the freight forwarders. Now, here's the transport Somebody has to get the custom clearance. Somebody has to do the insurance. So it's coming from one end, clearance part, insurance part, delivery to the part. So this whole thing, freight forwarding, or the shipping agent are responsible for. They conclude the contract of the carriage on behalf of the owner of the goods. They are intermediary who act on behalf of the shipper and a port. This is how it works. Now the custom rate certainly depends on nature of the goods, country of origins, and uses of the goods. So this custom tariff to a lot extent depends on the HS rate. And same HS we are using in the GST now also. So HS is a harmonized system coding which is developed by the custom union, which is in Brussels. So the custom union, which is, again, there are all member countries there around. So every country is using the HS code. So HS code has been given to different category, and then for each category, yes, you have your custom rates ad valorem or based on the values. Now there are document, transport document. I said to you, consignment note, bill of lading. Now the purpose of bill of loading is a document of ownership. So if I have got the bill of lading in my name or my company's name, that means I'm the owner. And we used to have very good precaution on this around. Suppose I'm sending the goods to X country and my UN head is there. I will not send on the name of the person. I'll send on the name of the office. If the person name is mentioned around in the document, because he or she is the head of the department, she can easily become the owner of it because the document is nothing but a title sheet. So it's an evidence of the contract of the carriage. It's a receipt. So this is the one practical tip I will talk about when I'm talking from the shipping. Anyone who's sending the goods around, never send on the name of the person, send on the name of company. Yes, if it is your own proprietary company, then it's a different ballgame. But if it's any big companies around, it will go on the name of the companies. Now, multimodal documents, you have combined transport bill of lading. You can have, because you're going through wide range of multimodals, sometime by truck, sometime by sea, sometime by train, sometime by air. Before it reaches from one end to another end, you have combined transport bill of lading. Container bill of lading, it covers for the container itself, or the groupage. Now, groupage means because the the forwarding agent has put the things together, so they have bill of lading until it can be grouped into efficient size. Now here, just example I want to tell you about, let's say Incoterm CIF. You have a contract. So you have this part, the contract, you have one contract is from supplier to the export port, you have a way bill. Then from the port of export to the import, you have bill of lading. And then after the goods have reached, again you have a way bill, which is going from that port by truck to the warehouse. So keep in mind, so broadly we have a sales contract, but then this is split into three parts. So we've got two way bills and one bill of lading around. The bill of lading is covering from one port to another port. While in the case of transport documents, we call them airway bill. In the case of others with the train, we could call as CIMs. Now, airway bill is not the ownership, while bill of lading is the ownership. That means if I have got the bill of lading in my name, I can take the ownership. While in the case of airway bill, it is not, it is okay, document of title, but it's not the document of title the way bill of lading is there. Here I'll just take a few minutes on the Incoterms because transportation without Incoterms is incomplete. Now there are 11 Incoterms around. Now in the past, Incoterms was all about international shipment. IN was international, but they are also important around because whether transportation is international or domestic, there are risks. And those risks, how do I mitigate it? Am I covering into my contract terms and conditions? If not, I think these terms are very useful around. It's very comprehensive and helps you a lot. Now you can see from moving from the top, X works going up to DDP. On the top is the one which you have minimum obligation for the seller. Seller will say, guys, take the goods, give my money. While when I go to the DDP, there are maximum obligation for the seller. That means the customer will say, guys, till I get the goods into my place as defined, I'm not going to process the payment. So if I'm using the payment terms of 30 days after receipt of goods, in case of X works, just after the X works, at the moment I take over, 30 days I have to make a payment. DDP means only after I receive the goods at the destination, only then I add 30 days to pick them. Then there are 4 terms which I put down separately. They are basically for sea transport, like free across the alongside ship, free on board, CFR, cost freight, and cost insurance freight. These are basically the term used only if you're doing by ship. If you're doing by multimodals, I would advise you to go with CIP, CPT, those terms around. Here you see the transfer of the cost data. I think this is a very nicely pictorial one. You look from one end to another end, depending on what terms you're using around, your risk and liabilities ends there around. X works, the liability of the supplier ends at this very point, the seller point. FCA, you can see close to this one. My goods have been kept close to the carrier. Alongside ship, free on board. That means the moment I board it on the ship, only till the time supplier takes care. After that, buyer takes over. Then we have CFR, CIF. The supplier might be taking care of your transportation, but the risk is yours as a buyer. So we have DAP, DAT, DDP. So you can imagine around the DDP is the only one where your risks are mitigated totally. My advice to you will be those, if you want to use it for within the country, I will say go for DAP or DAT. That's the one delivered at point or delivered at terminal. So if you're using it for domestic, go with that. Factors in setting the rates. I think we have touched already on this, so I don't need to repeat. Now the Incoterms, the DDP, the way you can see around delivered at port of destination. DAP and DT. Why I'm getting to the D term? The D stands for destination. Delivered, duty paid, delivered at terminal, delivered at point. So at the point means the moment it reaches the point, up to that. Unloading of this you have to pay as a buyer. While in this case DAT, it is unloaded. Now getting the custom clearance and taking it further to your points is your responsibility. So that's the way you look at it. Now coming at the key principles, like any business, there are principles. If you want to improve the efficiencies, so minimize the stopping, avoid damages, and the cost. Because if you've got too many stoppings on the way, that means your cost is going to go up and damages chances are also going up. As far as possible, minimize handling. As many handshakes you do, that means that many probability of being damages there. Every time you have to take with the crane, lift it up, unload it, and if crane some damage happens around, there's a possibility of damage. Full capacity. Break bulk and consolidation on long haul. So as I showed you earlier, in the long haul, if it is going from one port for export, I consolidate it. But once it reaches the terminal, I may put them into the break bulk if there are too many clients for that. Avoid empty back hauls. If they're coming back haul is empty, again is a cost to you. Effective scheduling and transportation rates are distance related. They're all covered with that. There's nothing to proportion to that. It's just covered with that. Now efficient use of this one, the speed part is very, very important around. You can see in the picture. if the speed is very low, my fuel consumption is high. But when the speed goes up, at some place I have got the optimum fuel consumption. But then again, if I push up this fuel speed around, the fuel consumption goes up. That's the same thing you find in the cars also. At some speed, they give you the optimum fuel consumption. If you go very low, it takes more. If you go very fast, there are other forces which works against you and your consumption goes up. Now coming back to the next one, the delegation in transportation, the third party logistic called 3PL, or you could call TPL, where T stands for third party logistic. That means you're giving the whole job to someone to distribute and fulfillment services. So technically 3PL is a very basic function. But then if you want somebody to do a service developers, advanced services, customers, adopters, and the last is integrating the customer also. So there are many further advanced around. I may have 10 or 12 3PL, then to manage the 10 3PL, I need another team in my office. So I may have a fourth PL which oversees the 3PL. So that's how the fourth PL comes in. Now when we're getting into the 3PL, there are other things around on-demand transportation. The full truckload, you all know, less than truckloads. I'm sending hotshot mean direct exclusive courier. Next flight out, I want guys, this has to go with the next, whatever the next flight available, mainly for the courier service, you know very well. And international expedited. If it is going even internationally, I want this to be expedited. So those type of on-demand services can be also added up. The goal of the transportation, I just said to you in the beginning, it is more about efficiencies. Safety also is important. That's very. Now here somebody may think why I'm touching of stress around, because this is the field in the past not many people have gone into this. They felt it's very stressful. So a lot of studies were done around the stress part, the behavior part, psychological part. Look at the drivers who have to drive 24 hours to reach one destination. So this has been a very stressful function because the job, the task demands a lot of stress, role is like this, physical demands, so all those things around. But then some people have found that, I mean, again, this could be very generic terms. The stress is also good. You will see that if the stress is not there, productivity is low. You think of any function, not only the transportation, any business around. If you have a stress on the staff, you have to do this today, you have to finish this. The guy has a full workload on the sheet on the table, that guy will be more productive. If the guy has come to the office, does not know what I'm going to do today, his or her productivity will be low. But if the guy has a list which is longer than one can do, and the guy has to work 24 hours, still not complete with the job, still there's a stress on the job around, then this is the other extreme around. So the study has been done by the psychologist. The basic level, which is called around 48% around stress, is good. I remember my boss, I used to have John Swenson, when I was working in Denmark. He says, guys, give the job to the busy guy, the job will be done. If you give the job to the person who's having empty, no work, job will never be done, because that guy will always find excuse not to do the job around. So stress is important, but again one has to draw the line where it is. I mean, in today's world, when the job is also going with us to the home, online, in the digital world, I think we also need a balance of work and life. So to become more productive at the end of the day. So now to cover the stress also, people are coming up with a lot of motivation theory. I'm sure those who have done MBAs, they must have gone through these in HR. When we talk of motivations, I mean, let's say for the motive part, is an inner state of mind. And that inner state of mind motivates me to do something. And that's how it makes my behavior. And motivation is willingness to exert efforts. We say somebody, guys, oh, this guy is very smart, but is not motivated to work. The guy doesn't want to exert at all to achieve something, to accomplish something. Now that accomplishment part is very important around. If the guy has got no desire to complete it, then there's no motivation. Now, this motivation could be very extensive and intrinsic. Extrinsic means this is external reward, there's a carrot, there's a promotion or something. There is something, there's an extrinsic. And there's intrinsic. Some people are very internally very motivated. Whether there is a reward or not, they're so motivated they want to achieve something to their satisfaction. I did this something. I did very nicely around. Whether they are praised or not, that's a different thing, but they still feel happier that I did something. I developed this software. I did this thing around. So that's where intrinsic, which makes them happier, something. So there are both type of motivations. There are a lot of theories about it. One theory is the cognitive theory. That means sometimes people get motivated when they get more knowledge. If I get more knowledge, I feel I've learned something. It motivates me to do something. There's another one, it's called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is normally at the very low level jobs where we're looking at deficiency. The guy is able to get the food first or not. The guy is not getting a food and you're trying to motivate. The guy has shelter, the guy has clothing, the guy has security. And above all, the guy has got the feeling of belongingness. That means the society or the group where they work, their competence is appreciated, they have a prestige, they have an esteem, they have their own role. I think those factor also goes into the motivation part. Now, with this, I really like to put one more parameters around is the performance indicators. So when you're getting into transportations or any business, I know I've met around many people in the transportations. Their performance indicators are very, very, very rudimentary. I think there's a need, once we're getting into really optimized fashion, we need to develop the KPIs. KPIs could be the success in terms of money, objectives, what I want to achieve. I want a safe, I want my brand is, I'm a safe transporter. So that objective is very clear. I'm a very reliable transporter. That means if I say 3 hours, the goods will reach in 3 hours. Optimization strategies. I'm always looking at a new strategies around to improve my KPIs. I want to improve my performance. And how do we evaluate them? So those KPIs, I would say, every big companies which are in the business of transportation need to develop around. I've seen in procurement, I've seen in supply chain, but on this one, transportation side, very limited one. So I would say this is another area. With this, my friend, I want to thank you all. Although this is a never-ending field, to me, it's still a very exciting field. So there's a lot to learn in this field, and particularly in India now with the e-commerce, transportation is becoming very, very important functions. Thank you, my friends, and